This coverage of Inspire.Legal is brought to you by Legal Talk Network, with many great podcasts to make your next commute or workout informative and educational. To improve your practice and stay in the know, visit us at LegalTalkNetwork.com. Hello and welcome to On the Road with Legal Talk Network. I'm Laurence Colletti. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Today, we're recording from Inspire.Legal 2.0 at New York Law School in New York City. And I've got a great panel. They finally wrapped it up. They're FOC, fresh off their conference. They're here to share the experience here. They put on a pretty great event. And so I'm going to go around the table and introduce everybody. So let me start with the visionary, the founder, Christian Lang. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Laurence. It's great to be here.
And so Matt Homann over here, as you informed me, was the master of ceremonies. He did a bang-up job this year. Really great stuff out there. You gave the conference a nice voice of levity, sir.
Well, thank you.
And we have our host over here, Dan Linna, who is our host of course, Law Technology Now, and he's been helping us out with On the Road through Legal Week. But you were an attendee. How'd it go for you today?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I had a chance to work with some folks to lead one of the unpanels that put the structure together. But the whole point of it was, it's not your typical panel. And it was just, we had amazing engagement in the room. This whole event had great energy, and so it was great to be a part of it.
So this was the second year for this particular conference, unconference as you guys like to bill it. But, definitely improved. It really felt like it was a little bit more tightened up and greased and ready to go. And so I guess, for the people that are less familiar with this, and maybe this is a Christian question, tell us about Inspire.Legal and what it was that inspired you to put this event on.
I described in the welcome session, it's a bit of an extension of the New York legal tech community, which I organize here in New York, which is a really wonderful collection of innovators, lawyers, thinkers, technologists from across the ecosystem. That's very much a community and a support structure. And we put on some programming, in particular programming that's violently anti-pay-to-play and just having what we think are important, interesting conversations. When it came time to put on a larger event, we were looking around trying to figure out how we could add value to the ecosystem. And particularly given the diverse nature of who's in the meetup community, the thing that we started to zero in on was this tension between kind of problems and solutions. I mean, I love a good expo hall and a trade show as much as anyone, but half of that stuff feels like solutions in search of a problem to me. And I personally believe that one of the critical inhibitors to legal innovation and transformation is that we don't richly enough and deeply enough and critically enough define the challenges and the problems we're facing. So we decided in our kind of crazy mindset, let's put on the events no one else would put on because you can't really make money from them. Let's put on an event focused exclusively on better defining legal problems, getting people from a bunch of different perspectives around the same tables and trying to more richly undefine the challenges they're facing and set some priorities for the like a bit of a roadmap for the future. And so that's what we were trying to do. And in that vein, we tried to come up with programming that was highly decentralized, highly participatory, highly interactive to get as much of that perspective and experiential learning from everyone in the community on the table as we could. And that was essentially the genesis and the driving motivation.
And highly unorthodox.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It's not your normal conference.
Certainly not your normal conference, yeah.
No, I mean, when you told me there was no sponsors, I was like, bold choice, Christian, bold choice.
Let's be very, very clear. No traditional sponsorship. Turned away all the vendors who wanted to come sell to the community. But this would not happen but for the incredible contributions of two pillars of the legal space, Clifford Chance and EY Law.
And EY Law.
Yeah, who thank you for the underscore from the Master of Ceremonies, Matt Homann.
And this is a great space here at New York Law School. And the dean was here today.
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, he was thrilled.
Incredible.
He was really happy to get up there on stage and talk with you all and seemed really, although he's doing you all a big favor, he was very grateful to have you here. He's a really nice guy.
That's what's incredible. All these stakeholders, there's no quid pro quo here. They don't get anything. There are no strings attached to the substantive programming. We get to put together the conversation we think is most important, and they're willing to support it because they think it moves the industry forward. And I think that's extraordinary support. And that's just not just saying, I really do think it's extraordinary and it's rare, and it allows us to do things that wouldn't make a lot of sense economically to a lot of people. So it's fun.
And it's unbelievably rare coming off Legal Week, where everything seems to have a sponsorship. It's been a while since I've been there, but were the urinals still sponsored this year? Because they have been in the past, right? This is one of those.
Is that real?
It's totally true. It's totally true. I know. I swear to it. I've been there. But one of the challenges that is so interesting is that when people come here, they are so used to and are worn down a bit by a week of being sold to. And to be able to be in a conversation, have a creative, engaging, problem-solving, challenge-focused hour or 2 or 3 or 4 as they spend their day here, without it feeling like there's some mercenary at the table or someone who's got to collect a number of business cards, is really refreshing. And for those of us who aren't in that world every day, I don't know that we appreciate it, but given the fatigue that sometimes comes from Legal Week, it's really an amazing experience, especially because the sponsors, to their credit, are talking their regular people, I'm using air quotes around that, out of what they should have gotten out of their sponsorship.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And like, it leads to incredible candor. Like I was hopping from unpanel to unpanel, 5 of which were running contemporaneously. And there's one around firm, client, law company collaboration and innovation. And I literally heard they had this wonderful fishbowl structure running. I was literally hearing like the clients saying this and the law firm people saying, and vendors mixing it up, getting in their face, be like, that's nuts. Like, that's not how it works. Like, you guys are asking this, but you're not giving us this. And like, it was a debate and they were really engaged, and it was incredibly constructive and fun and rich, and not the kind of thing you're doing if you're in the business development mindset.
Right.
Well, let's get into that. I mean, you're talking about the unpanel. Now, there's some programming this year, pretty unique. And so you had unpanel pitches. You had 5 separate unpanel pitches. People had to get up there and convince people to go attend their unpanel. And then you had some debates at lunch. That was a surprise. My favorite. We'll get into that one. I think it was definitely Zach versus Bob. I thought that was pretty fiery. So that was great. And then you had the legal problems. You had 20 legal problems, and you drew them out. And so let's walk through that. Just kind of explain, for somebody that maybe wants to come next year, what they can expect.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. We try to get everyone engaged substantively when they register for the event. Getting them thinking, we're asking them questions. The event is oriented around a number of substantive conversations. 1, around the challenges inherent in technology procurement and adoption. 2, challenges around platformization and interoperability. 3, the one I was referencing a moment ago about collaboration, firm, client, service companies, legal service companies. 4, around experiential learning and training. And 5, around issues financing legal ventures and collaborative funding models. There's 5 larger conversations where I have essentially deputized groups of really interesting thought leaders and actors in these spaces that are relevant to these conversations, and delegated to them the responsibility of crafting a structure that will draw out as many people's ideas as we can, what people think are the most pressing challenges in that area, starting to unpack them, see how they overlap, see how they relate to one another, all with the view to, by the end of the session, sourcing 4 specific challenge statements, which Matt helps us craft into how might we statements, which are then carried forward into small group roundtable workshopping in the afternoon. And so it's an evolution from crowdsourcing inputs, doing some work around them to curate, doing a deep dive insight discovery exercise in the workshop, and on the back end, having some additional insight and reframing of the challenges that we'll be publishing and carrying forward, potentially for future work in the future. And in between the interstitial bits, we have some fun programming to give people a break. And so,
well, now that's really high level analytics and a critique, so to speak, of the legal profession and some of the problems that it has. And you all are coming up with some ideas on how to fix it. But I think one of the things that helped maybe drive this home for me is like, who is this conference for? I mean, you've got lawyers here that are in the fray, and you all are kind of looking at it from a kind of a global planning perspective on how to make the legal profession better. But who is this conference for, Christian?
Yeah, that's the weird part, right? All the shows that are focused on sales, how do you sell to people? You segment your audience. So you're talking to a very narrow slice deliberately. We are trying to do exactly the opposite. And part of what's animating this conference is a belief that the challenges faced by different stakeholders, all in different parts of this balkanized legal ecosystem, are often the same challenges. They might manifest themselves differently in a particular context. But at the right level of abstraction, or if you dive into the details and really drill down, it's the same sort of challenge. And we can bring a richness to the way we think about it and define it and understand it by getting all those people who are experiencing that challenge with all of its manifestations from all these different places. So in a very real sense, the conference is kind of for anybody who wants to think critically about these legal challenges. And it really does run the gamut. I mean, we have practicing lawyers in here. We have professional staff from law firms, knowledge management, innovation types. We have clients. We have law professors. We have some government lawyers. We have some technologists. We have a certain number of people here who are not even connected to the legal industry, but just think it's an important frontier. Students. It really is a very diverse cross-section of the legal ecosystem.
There's a framing that I use when I think about the kind of ideal person who comes to an event like this. It's a term I heard from someone, and I wish I could take credit for it. It's the charismatic deviant. And when you look around this room, well, not now because it's empty, but when you look around the room an hour ago, this room is filled with charismatic deviants. It's people who are outliers in their particular organization because they think differently about things. And it could be around service delivery, could be around procurement, could be around education. This is a really target-rich environment for people who want to engage with other smart, cool people. And there's other places like that, but they're hard to find. And you're almost always, when you come to a conference or a meeting, you're traditionally sitting through a bunch of PowerPoints and waiting for that last little bit of time to talk to the speaker or engage in the networking reception. You're hopeful to find one or two of those people in any conference you attend. And here, it's you can't swing a dead cat, as my grandmother would say, without hitting 10 of them. And I see this room, and one of the most amazing things about it, even as I look at this table, and I'll give credit to everyone here, like these are all the interesting people that you otherwise feel like you're lucky to have found in a room, and at Inspire, they're everywhere. And that's pretty cool.
It's a pretty, it's worth mentioning. It's a pretty intimate experience. It's 200 people. The smallest room that we all have to be in at the same time only holds 200, so we can only have 200 people here. And I love looking out and seeing the law student sitting next to the managing partner, the general counsel, and they're just shooting the breeze and chatting it up and collaborating with one another. It's fun.
And of gigantic firms or some of the world's biggest companies. This isn't the B team here, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I have to say, I was just watching the presentations and how comfortable everybody was up on stage. And you could tell they had been through this drill many times before. They're all very comfortable in their own skin and they're up there telling jokes. And it was really a fun, just a fun exchange. And so, you guys pulled this off with just some amazing group of people. You had luminaries, you have unpanel moderators, you have volunteers. I definitely want to get into that. But speaking of deviants, I have Dan Linna over here. And he was an attendee.
That is a terrible transition.
So, but, Dan, you're an attendee.
I can't wait for the Google search on the transcript of deviant and Dan Linna in the exact same sentence.
Insert creative.
Now I see why you brought me in on this one. All right. Thanks, Laurence.
No, but Dan, obviously you travel all over the place. You attend a lot of events. You go to a lot of conferences. And so, you're a connoisseur of this type of event. And so I just want to ask you just kind of point blank, why are you here? Why did you decide to attend?
Well, Christian and I actually talked about this last year. When you came up with the idea whether you wanted to do this, I think I spoke with you kind of early in the process about, well, what do you think? Is this value? And I was really excited about it because one of the things that drives me crazy about some of these conferences. I've joked before about Legal Week that sometimes it feels like Groundhog's Day. It's like, gosh, I've been hearing these same things for the last several years, and how do we? Now, I have to say, I was involved in some really great conversations at Legal Week this week, and I saw some really excellent panels. We had some great podcasts while we were at Legal Week. But you're aiming to do something different here and to really empower people. One of the things I've encountered at so many other conferences, right, is when you're up there in a panel, usually there's a ton of people in the audience who really ought to be engaged in the conversation, right? So that's what this is aimed to be a little bit different, is to really be focused on let's empower the people in the room. Let's go through a process of identifying the problem. And, I think one of the things I'd like to hear Matt talk a little bit about, kind of like, to me, this is a little bit meta, right? Because I want people to go through this process and then take it back to their organizations. And we talk a lot about, there's a lot of buzz around design thinking, lean thinking, agile. So many of these things all come back to kind of like empowering people to identify problems and solve problems, but then thinking about the customer. And that's kind of like, to me, everything that this was all about, that you architected working with Christian for this conference.
I always think that we always say this, and it's only partially tongue-in-cheek, is that people connect better when they're thinking together, not just drinking together. And it doesn't mean that drinking together isn't necessarily a bad thing, but so much of our time at conferences and meetings where we feel like we really get the engagement is in that kind of hallway time where we're lucky enough to run into someone, or that networking reception. And one thing that is amazing about this event, and it's the way that we think about stuff at Filament, is how do you get people to engage in meaningful ways throughout the course of a day that doesn't feel artificial, that doesn't feel silly, that doesn't feel like singing Kumbaya, holding hands in a drum circle. And when you can give people a really interesting challenge, or even better, help them define that challenge themselves, and then give them just enough structure to have a conversation about it, to discuss it with people who care about it in a similar way, they walk out with a dramatically different set of experiences than if someone is reading their PowerPoint slides on the stage in a room full of people sitting shoulder to shoulder. And I look at that in particular, and people always, when they come to an event like this, I remember last year, and even for the new people this year, they feel like they're going to be comfortable in the unpanels because it feels normal. You're selling them something they've never bought disguised as something they buy all the time. But the moment they come into this workshop, you can see the introverts a little bit nervous. You can see people wondering what the hell is actually going to happen. But then you look around and you can't tell who's who. Everyone is deeply engaged because they're talking about something that's important. And a thing that I mentioned at the very beginning of the day that it really sticks with me still is that most of the people in this room don't have these peers one cubicle over or one office door over from them in their day-to-day. And to be able to find that tribe, I think, as many people have said, is really compelling. It sounds a bit corny, but when do you get to have really, really high-level conversations with people that are thoughtful in the same way you are?
I want to pick up there on something that was one of my favorite parts of the day. There's a really brilliant woman that I know who was coming up to me, and we were doing our readouts and had the work product that we're trying to capture so we can share with people, and it was a very sparse worksheet. I was like, what's going on? And it turned out that table, they were so enjoying finding people they could commune with and share experiences with and learn from. They went so deep and so candid, they just had to take it off the record. So that entire workshop's table is just, it's not memorialized like the rest of them, but I love that. And last year there was a general counsel from one of the biggest banks in the world, and they got so personal and so real with what they were talking about. They took the entire room off the record. When the photographer tried to come in, they kicked him out. And it was really like a deep, meaningful discussion of the type that doesn't happen. And that's my favorite part. It's fun it'll be to read stuff out. That's my favorite part.
And the hardest part about Inspire, and for those people who are thinking about it next year, is that you won't believe it until you experience it. And that sounds corny. That sounds like a bunch of marketing BS. But think about all the times you get to be in a room of 100 to 200 other people who are trying to solve these unbelievably hard, difficult, thorny challenges, who want you to succeed, right? Who aren't worried about what it will change in their lives or their compensation or their tenure or whatever. And we don't have enough of those kind of events because they're all built around this model. To get to the point that Christian made at the very beginning, they're all built around this model of we've got to keep everyone happy and feed everyone in this lowest common denominator way to have the most butts in seats and feet in the exhibit hall versus we can talk to a handful of folks, bring a couple sponsors in, and have really amazing conversations without regard to the profit motive.
All right, so I just have a couple of minutes left. Otherwise, my audio engineers will be like a mutiny when I get back home. So I do want to recap just basically like on.
This isn't live?
I don't know how to answer that. No, it's not live.
This isn't radio. I thought it was radio.
I just crossed the age line.
Oh, yeah, that was funny. The age line. So, that was a common theme throughout the age line. So who came up with that? Is that a thing? I've never heard that before, the age line.
A table came up with it. It wasn't mine. I refuse to take credit for that.
What is the age line then? Because that's the first time I heard it. And I understood by the context you're using it, but just for the benefit of the audience, what's the age line?
The age line, in my view, is always a year older than I am.
Okay. Gotcha.
39?
Yes.
All right, so let's do a brief recap, though. So I want to talk about the luminaries, the unpanel moderators, and some of the volunteers real quick. So Christian.
This goes back to what Dan was talking about. I think the reason why it works, we try to identify what we think are meaningful conversations to have, but then we find really passionate people in those areas and we empower them to create a conversation around it. And so we get to leverage all their expertise. So the luminaries actually embraces both the thinkers and the doers who helped us craft the unpaneled discussions, which are the larger discussions, as well as the roundtable moderators who help do the insight discovery. Those are both luminaries. Half of them serve as unpanelists, half of them don't.
Well, tell me about these people, though. Who are they? You have an impressive lineup here, and I think it's worth mentioning who some of these people are.
Yeah, well, I won't name names to the exclusions of other people, but
Dan Linna.
Dan Linna is one of them. Yeah, no, but here, okay, that's a good jumping off point. The experiential learning and training unpanel. We have some members of the academy, like Bill Henderson. We have some folks coming from law firms who think critically about the stuff like Nikki Shaver from Paul Hastings. When we're having the platforms and interoperability conversations, we're pulling in somebody who's leading UX on behalf of Legal and somebody who is running one of the major document management systems, and somebody who's running the technology integration efforts at a Big Four. I mean, we try to whose perspective would be valuable to Rich to help facilitate this conversation. But again, they're not speaking. They're just helping to drive the conversation and ask the right questions to tease out the opinions.
Yeah, just to highlight that, I mean, the on-panel discussion around experiential learning, I mean, it was really great about that. I mean, everyone in that room, and there must have been 35 people in that room, by the time we were done with that 90-minute session, everyone in the room had contributed to that conversation. And there were at least a dozen people then who contributed significantly. It was really an amazing discussion from a lot of different perspectives.
I heard it got a little animated.
It did. Yeah. It got very animated. It was a real discussion, right? I mean, Jeff Carr jumping in, talking about, wait, who else in the room is a customer? No one else in the room is a customer. Like, so it's like, it was great. I mean, we need to have more of those conversations where people all feel heard and we can talk about what are the obstacles we need to overcome to move forward.
No, I like the fire. I mean, I like the debates. People got up there and kind of went at each other a little bit in a fun way. It was fun.
It was different fun. We didn't know if it would land, but it worked great. We basically, Matt had a great idea. Instead of having a mix and mill breakfast before we start, let's start and then have a kind of a guided networking exercise after. So we came up with some controversial premises that you could take both sides of, but that were a little spicy, a little provocative. We found the ones that really got traction during the networking hour, and then we found brave people to come up and have a live debate about those issues, short form, 2 minutes on each side, in front of the group. And we got laughs and cheers and jeers, and it was a blast.
Yeah, I heard a couple boos in there, but it was like a fun boo. So. But my favorite was...
they were booing the MC.
They were not booing the MC. But my favorite one was Zach versus Bob. And I got to tell you, I love Bob, but I think Zach just crushed him.
I don't agree with that. I thought Bob came back. I mean, Zach made the point that law firms do innovate and they know how to make money, but Bob made the point that, hey, wait, there's cost to that too, right? We have 80% of people who don't have access to legal services, right? I mean, so it's about, I don't know.
Do you think Bob won, or do you think
Zach wrestling over the framing of the debate?
That was fun. And it was also substantive. Like those, it was great. I really did enjoy that. And in the keeping them pithy like that, forcing them to follow that format, that was good. I really enjoyed it.
Matt and I decided that in about 5 seconds from the stage. How do you want to do this? 2 minutes?
That's been one of the beautiful things about this collaboration is that there's not a lot of customers who will allow you to kind of on the fly see what's going to work best for the room as the room is engaging in the day. And so they want to have that run of show that's absolutely perfect down to the minute. And even if it's not going to work or land, you got to keep doing it. And this is when we knew we wanted to do the debates, but we weren't sure how we were going to do the debates. And we then realized we have only a limited time for the debates.
Because the fireside chat went so long and great. So we were just like, all right.
And so how about we do 2 minutes? They each get 2 minutes, and then they each get a minute rebuttal, and then we just vote by admiration of the crowd.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. Well, listen, guys, we're out of time, or else I'm going to get some nasty grams from my audio engineers. So what I want to do, though, before we close it out today is just go around the table, give some contact information. So if our listeners want to follow up, maybe they want to attend next year, how can they find? Let's start with Christian.
Sure thing. So for the conference itself, the URL, the name is the URL, Inspire.Legal. We'll get you and
my gosh, what happened here? So
incredible.
You sent a text message, and then 2 beers showed up.
Laurence, the level of volunteerism.
That is high quality.
Let's be honest. I wrote a handwritten note and I passed it to Christian that said, "Can you text us some beers?" Christian then texted one of the amazing volunteers, and they showed up. And Christian was so impressed with the fact that we were carrying this entire podcast that he only asked for 2 beers and not 4 for the other 2 of you.
That's okay.
I thought this was a customer-centric event, though, and you notice, Laurence, they didn't bring us beers. So, I don't know what to say about that.
These are pros. We're the hacks over here.
I'm just pleased that we're doing this at 9 a.m. in the morning.
That's true. Exactly. All right, what were we talking? Oh, yeah. So
contact information.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the URL. You can find our social handles, most of which are Inspire_Legal, just because of social handles, right? Personally, you can find me on Twitter at Christian L. Lang, or on LinkedIn, or those are really my main media.
All right, same question, Matt.
So you can find me at Matt Homann, MATTHOMANN, at nearly every social handle that I care about. My company's Filament, thefilament.com. We help smart people think together better.
All right, and Dan.
On Twitter, Dan Linna. And then if you want to send me an email the old-fashioned way, you can find me on the Northwestern website.
And where else can they find you, Dan?
On Law Technology Now.
Thank you for the plug of your show. All right. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or best yet, your favorite podcasting app. I'm Laurence Colletti. Until next time, thank you for listening.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. Subscribe via iTunes and RSS. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, or download our free Legal Talk Network app in Google Play and iTunes. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.